Hello, I'm Mark Siddall, and my practice is LEAP, the local ethical architectural practice, as we're sometimes known, and at other points in time it is also known as the Low Energy Architectural practice. Now, before I go into the presentation in too much detail, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. If you were spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on a new home, would you expect it to look good, have enough space, be healthy, be a healthy place to live, provide fresh air, provide comfort, warmth, not being too noisy, provide low energy bills perhaps, or infrequently overheat? If you were building your own house, which of these would you live without? Well, let me just tell you something that might surprise you. There's some shocking truths about UK housing. And there are 6 ways that you could say that the construction industry, the housing industry, is defrauding its clients. And I'm going to give you a few tips on how you might prevent it, in the manner of speaking. So first thing to recognise is that there was a study done in 2005 by the Centre for Architecture and the Built Environment. And you can see here in this graph that, or series of graphs, that the Yorkshire and Humber, 80% of their homes are of average quality. You've got 14% of poor quality. Meanwhile, in the northwest, 62% are of average quality and 24% are of poor quality. Meanwhile, in the northeast, we have 63%, which are of average quality, and an astonishing 31% which are of poor quality. And you can also see that we've got one of the smallest margins, certainly compared to the northwest, of good and very good homes. So you've really got to wonder what kind of what's going on in the construction industry. And then you've got to, if you think a bit further, or analyse it a bit further, then you find that in the UK we're constructing some of the smallest homes in Europe. So here you can see the UK brought out in red, and the homes are often around about 75 square metres, and it's only in certain places like Sweden and Portugal and Italy. Even there they're building 80 square metres and above. Meanwhile, other parts of Europe, Germany and the likes, areas of Spain, they're building near 100 square metres as an average household size. Now, one thing to recognise also is some research from the University of Exeter Medical School that was released in 2014, and they reported that the UK has got one of the highest rates of asthma in the world. And they did a study of 700 new properties and found that poorly ventilated homes are also likely to increase people's exposure to other biological and chemical physical contaminants. So, basically, in a nutshell, a building that's not ventilated properly can make you ill and have an impact upon your health and well-being and the health and well-being of you and your family. Meanwhile, we've got a study that was done by the Technology Strategy Board looking at the different ways that we ventilate buildings. And in particular, they were looking at the little trickle vents that you get on windows. And what they found was that in a majority of cases, if you're looking through the greyness of the slide, you can see the red behind. Well, they found that the majority of times, a lot of the trickle vents were closed in properties. If they'd been, and they hadn't always, the appropriate number hadn't always been provided. What they found was, therefore, that people were closing them because of discomfort, and that meant that they were undermining the indoor air quality that they might otherwise have been expecting. In fact, the researcher Sterling Howison in 2014 highlighted that an airtight home with trickle vents are likely to result in a more toxic and hazardous indoor environment with concurrent and significant long-term and insidious impacts upon public health. So, yeah, he also said that the methodology underpinning the current regulations cannot be considered creditable. So some really damning kind of indictments of natural ventilation strategies, trickle vent strategies. There's also been research done by the Building Research or BISRIA, an industry body, and they did 40 random inspections on different properties, and they found that 95% of the dwellings that were being constructed, in theory to the building regulations, actually failed to achieve that standard. and a number of those properties having a number of failure modes. So some really significant problems with with mechanical ventilation systems as well, it would seem, out in the popular elements of the construction industry. So, and then if we take it one stage further, there's some research that I did with Jack Harvey Clark from Apex Acoustics. And we reviewed over 1,000 homes, studies that had been done by academics, and what we found was that the noise levels were always too high from mechanical ventilation systems. And the consequence of that was that people tended to switch off or switch down the ventilation systems, which again compromised indoor air quality. And the disappointing thing that we found was that building regulations makes a recommendation of 30 dBA. Now, which is, consider that to be around about talking pitch for the person. So that's more than a little bit noisy, and you can see we've also managed to unearth some key bits of information here that suggest that we should be trying to target much quieter noise levels so that we disturb only around about 5%, perhaps 10% of people. And then there's also been research done by Leeds Metropolitan University that has examined, over the last 20 years, that's examined the actual measured performance of buildings. So as building regulations are moving ahead, buildings are costing more and more money because you're spending more and more money on insulation, on draft proofing techniques, etc. And what their studies have shown is that the buildings haven't been performing properly. And what you've got in blue here is the predicted performance, and in red is the actual measured performance. Now, over on the right-hand side, you can see two bungalows. In fact, they're two properties that I was involved with, and I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail in a moment. But you can see that though there is a very marginal difference, it's actually within measurement error, and it's therefore kind of acceptable performance. And it was the first projects of the kind that Leeds Met had ever found that were performing as predicted. So the racecourse estate, as it's known, was quite a groundbreaking project in that respect, and not just in terms of its energy performance, because we spoke to the people that were living in the properties, and we used a certain questionnaire methodology known as a bus survey, and this graph shows the results of that. And what you can see in the sort of white circles with little grey circles, they are other benchmark projects, and you can see, and then the dark grey solid, the black dot, that's racecourse. Your racecourse is just off the charts by comparison to some of these other properties. The level of comfort that people are experiencing is reported to be very, very high, and we know that this has got some statistical validity to it. And then also in terms of people's satisfaction, so in terms of the space provision, the design, the aesthetics, the usability, the practicality of the houses, all of these things as well. Once again, you can see that compared to the rest of the database, racecourse is really performing very well indeed. And what you've got there is some replicable concepts. Now, if we go back to thinking about ventilation for a minute, what we find is that there was a study that was done by the Technology Strategy Board of 54 homes across 46 sites, and it showed time and time again that the homes that were built to the Code for Sustainable Homes, as it was, or built to building regulations in the standard sense, they were failing to actually provide adequate ventilation 81% of the time. Meanwhile, the passive house buildings that were also within that study, they were performing correctly within either meeting or in a borderline condition 95% of the time. So there's a chalk and cheese kind of contrast there, that if you want good indoor air quality, if you don't want to get asthma, if you want to have good respiratory issues, if you don't want to be getting ill as much, then you need to make sure that the ventilation's right, and the quality assurance methods behind passive house seem to be key. And Jack Harvey Clark, the acoustician I mentioned earlier on, he came along to the racecourse estate and he did some measurements, and he found that the acoustic performance as delivered was actually very acceptable, definitely within acceptable parameters. And the loudest things, the things that distorted the readings, was actually the ticking of a clock. So, come on. With the building is being designed in such a way that you're not really getting any background noise from the mechanical systems that would disturb your sleep, because it's been designed appropriately. Unlike a lot of other projects, these 1,000 homes that Jack and I also reviewed. So the feedback from the people living there one resident. The bungalows helped enormously health-wise. The clean, constant fresh air has helped with my breathing, as I suffer from heart problems and asthma. Also, getting about the bungalow is a great help to my mobility, back problems, knee and hip problems. So, some really positive feedback there. And in fact, there is another piece of feedback that there was somebody that had arthritis, and they actually reported that their symptoms had receded significantly as well. So Alan Thompson from Gen 2 Construction, his feedback was well, very kind. Mark's technical knowledge of low carbon design and building performance is breathtaking, and importantly for me, he also has an eye on what it would take to construct, from a construction perspective, to build these groundbreaking homes. So he's got no hesitation there in recommending me, which is very kind of him. Meanwhile, you've got Wolfgang Feist from the Passive House Institute, and he said about me is Mark is one of the pioneers to introduce Passive House to the UK. His experience and ongoing research into building performance makes him one of the UK's most skilled and knowledgeable Passive House architects. I've no doubt that Mark Siddall's buildings also offer an economical and attractive solution to investors. So again, more praise, very kind words there. And then a final quote here from Dr. David Johnston from Leeds. Leeds Met as was, now Leeds Beckett University. The racecourse development is one of the very few developments where it's been shown that it's possible to bridge the gap between the predicted and measured performance. It's been a joy to work with someone that's so committed and knowledgeable. So again, some very, very kind words there from people that I've had the great opportunity to work with. And I'd just like to mention Steel Farm, which is a custom home, a bespoke home that was designed out in the outer reaches of Northumberland. And what we see here is a view from down the little farm lane, and some feedback from Judith, who now lives in there. Beforehand, they were living in a bothy, and in the winter, one winter, it actually got so cold that it was warmer in their fridge. They actually measured how warm it was, and the fridge was being kept at about 11 degrees, and meanwhile in their living room it dropped down to around about 4 or 5 degrees. So Judith here says, before it was hard work having the family come and stay. In the summer everything was okay, but a bit depressing in the winter. I had to shut off part of the house because of the cold. Now everything's much easier and much more cheery. I enjoy using the whole house. Meanwhile, the building contractor, how did he find it? Well, Joe Dixon here from JD Joinery and Building. The drawings covered every foreseen detail and problem which could occur in the building process. The exceptional standard of the construction documents definitely saved the client money. We could not have built the project without a standard batch of architect's drawings and specification. So again, another indication of the kinds of work that goes into producing some of these high caliber projects. So if that's of interest, if you think that there are other people that deserve this kind of standard of workmanship and standard of design, then please just let me know about any self-build plots that are out there, and I'll be very happy to help self-builders to complete their homes. Now, it might be down in Wynyard, it might be anywhere else in the northeast. So if you hear of anything, then please let me know. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.